Okay, I am in a season of being disciplined and obedient. I think it's barely 7 o'clock in the morning, just got Kennedy up for school. And when God says move, I'm taking heed immediately and doing exactly what he told me to do. So I turned to the Bible and I turned to Jeremiah. The first chapter, in the fourth verse, it says, "Now the word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I have appointed you a prophet to the nations." I think it's time for me to share my birth story. Born here in Jacksonville, Florida. My parents were married. I was a honeymoon baby. My dad lost his job, which means he lost his insurance. And the doctor that my mom was going to the entire time, she had to stop going to that and going to the city hospital, which was called Shands now, but it was University in the 80s. For those who don't know, I spent my whole career pretty much in either labor and delivery or hospice. If I'm not bringing in life, I'm helping usher in life out. That's just a calling that I have. And the reason why is when you hear my story, you will understand it more. So, my mom went to go get a PPP. That is a biophysical profile on me. I did not score well. I was like a 3 out of 10. Well, 4 out of 10, I believe. 4 out of 10. So that's immediately you go to the hospital and you have to get surgery. You have to get surgery or get induced, right? So my mom got to the hospital, did exactly what the doctor said. They did not see my mom for 10 hours. By the time they saw my mom, it was no longer an induction. It was an emergency C-section. When I got older, after being in career for labor and delivery, I decided to go get my birth records. And I was quite disgusted what I saw. By the time I did this, I had already been a nurse for like 10, 15 years. Well, not 10, 15 years, about 10 years. I've been a nurse for 15 years. So my APGARs, they score the baby. Like once you are born, they label, like it's usually like 8 out of 9, 9 out of 9, 9 out of 10. My APGARs were 0, 0, 2. But what's worse is how I experienced, both my parents, all of us, we experienced systemic racism. So I get mad just thinking about this. So my mom is very sensitive to anesthesia. So when they put her out, because it was an emergency C-section, they put her out. She did not wake up until like 18 hours later. I was in a NICU, nursery, or whatever. So when she woke up, she said, "What am I having? What did I have?" They told her she had a girl. Then she said, Where's my husband?" And all the nurses were looking and were like, "Oh, we didn't know you were married." My mom was 19 when she had me. The fact that they thought, because my mom was 19 years old, that she didn't have a husband, and she was just, they already had labeled her. That whole nursing staff had labeled her. My dad was sitting in the waiting room the entire time. So neither one of my parents were able to experience me at birth. So when I say that I've had systemic racism my whole life, I really do mean that because I was brought into the world with that. That's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the injustice that we are currently experiencing in this world, because it's just not right. So I'm fast forward, like, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about how I help women during their time. And I think about, look back at my whole life. I knew what my first calling was. I didn't know why, but I was a little kid that would sit there and watch women give birth all day. You can ask my parents. That's like what I was always obsessed with. I was obsessed with delivering babies, and I wanted to be an OBGYN so bad. Then I was going to be a midwife, and all this stuff. But just to think about when you read textbooks and you hear stories like, oh, this usually happened. Well, I'm a living proof of that. I'm a living proof of systemic racism. And it did not just stop there. It continued. But I broke cycles. Because despite all that came through me, right? All that stuff that went through me when I'm my birth story, I still decide to serve. And just because I experienced something that way, it was my duty to make sure no other mom would ever experience what my mom experienced during her birth story. Trauma starts in the womb. I had a very traumatic birth. I was dead. I can sit here and literally say that I literally have experienced everything, including death. That is how I know I'm here for a reason. I know I'm here to change systems. I know that I was placed here for a bigger cause. And while I'm sitting here and I'm looking next to the scripture, the verse starts off with a divine call. So that's my story and why I'm so passionate about systemic racism and breaking systems and breaking cycles, because that's how I was born. And it did not stop there. Another story about my parents. My parents broke some cycles, but another thing about them that I'm very proud of. Both of my parents came from the hood. My daddy came from the 7th Ward, Father Street in Louisiana. They moved to Jacksonville when he was like in middle school or high school during that time. And my mama, she's from 23rd and Chase. When they got married, I was born and we lived on 22nd and Boulevard. Then we moved across the water before I was even a toddler. We was moving to Arlington. But I'll never forget, like my mom, when I got older, she was talking about when they moved over here to Arlington and how no one would rent to them. And this was in the 90s, mind you, late 80s, early 90s. Nobody would rent to my parents. So we ended up eventually moving to Bay Meadows. And we stayed in Bay Meadows. And my mom was like, "We're not leaving this apartment till I buy my house." My mom and my dad, both my parents, I'm so proud of them. They literally went back to Arlington, and the same people who didn't rent to them, they didn't care. They built a house from the ground up. We were the first family, one of the first families to pretty much integrate East Arlington, and I'm so proud of that. But this goes to show you, this systemic racism is still here. This is not 1964. This is not 1940s. This is here this was in the 90s, and to this day, we're still talking about the same things. But I know I had to experience all of these things. My parents had to experience all of these things so we can break cycles, so we can heal generations. And I'm not just talking about my family. I'm talking about all of us collectively. I think that's a word that God wanted me to share today. I really appreciate all of y'all sitting here listening to this. Now I need to go get me some coffee so I can start my day. I love you all. And I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.